Hello, fellow griever. Welcome to the Leftover Pieces podcast, where I talk honestly about suicide loss, grief, and learning to live forward after the loss. I'm Melissa, your host. Hello, fellow griever. Welcome back to the Leftover Pieces. Today's conversation is one of those episodes that feels deeply honest, deeply validating, and honestly, deeply important. I recently sat down with Tracy Oeser, suicide loss survivor, grief educator, fellow coach, advocate, and the founder of Journey Thru Grief. Tracy lost her daughter Chelsie to suicide nearly 20 years ago, and together we have a conversation that spans everything from those devastating earlier years all the way to what grief looks like decades later. We talk about the strange relationship we have with time after loss, how grief can feel both endless and impossibly fast all at once. We talk about the reality that suicide loss changes us permanently, not because we are broken, but because profound loss reshapes a life from the inside out. There's a lot in this conversation that I think many of you are going to feel to your core, in your very bones. We talk about the isolation so many suicide loss survivors experience, the pressure to get back to normal, why community matters so very much, how our grief evolves over time, the difference between surviving grief and eventually learning how to carry it, and the complicated process of rebuilding a life that you never asked to rebuild. We also spend time talking about something I know many of us struggle with, the feeling that nobody around us truly understands this kind of loss unless they've lived it too. And honestly, hearing another mother, nearly 20 years into this journey, speak so openly about what changes, what remains, and what healing actually looks like felt incredibly powerful, even for me, where I sit 10 years in. And I really want you to listen all the way through to the end of this episode because Tracy shares details about a upcoming Journey Thru Grief conference happening this August. A conference specifically centered around suicide loss survivors, community healing, support, and connection. There are not nearly enough spaces like this in our world. And for the listeners of this podcast, Tracy has also created a special discount code. Through June 15th, you can use the code MELISSA to receive $50 off registration for the conference. You'll find the link to this conference and all of those details waiting for you in the show notes at the end of this episode. So whether you're newly grieving years down the road or somewhere in between, I hope this conversation reminds you of something important. You're not failing at grief. You're not doing it wrong. And you are absolutely not alone. Let's get into today's conversation with Tracy Oeser. Hi, Tracy. Welcome to the podcast. I'm honored to have you on.
Thanks for having me on.
You're so welcome. I know that everybody has heard your bio before we started talking here, so they know a little bit about, and probably a lot of people listening already listen to your podcast and maybe already know about some of what you do. Tracy and I have been running in a similar circle for many years, and yet have only recently made introductions and met. We've made fast friends, and it's my honor to have her on, and wish that we weren't talking to each other for this reason. It's part of both of our realities and has been for longer than we both wish it had been. So, Tracy, I want you to start by telling everybody that's listening your lost story.
Sure. So I lost my daughter, Chelsie. She was 16 back in December of 2006. And we're coming up on the 20th anniversary here in December, which just doesn't even seem possible to me. But she was very vibrant, very free-spirited. Her whole world was her friends and what she could do with her friends and for her friends, and would do anything for them. Very artsy. She was trying to create her own fashion line. So she had a lot of dreams. She had a lot of goals. And then all of a sudden, her mental health just took a nosedive and we lost her by suicide. We didn't see it coming, but in some aspects we kind of did, because she had made an attempt and then we thought we had resolved the issue, and obviously we did not. So it's been a long couple of decades of trying to understand and answer those questions of why did she make that choice, and why, and the usual things like guilt and what did I do, what did I not do? Yeah, everything that we hear from survivors. It's a very intricate situation. It's a devastating situation. I wish we were meeting under different circumstances, but it's a story that needs to get out there so that other parents know they're not alone, or anybody that loses somebody by suicide, they know that they're not alone in their grief.
Yeah, exactly. To hear that you're 20 years in and that doesn't sound possible, I'm sure that many grievers listening much earlier in their journey think, holy cow. I remember thinking, I don't know how I'm going to carry this a year, let alone 20 times that. And here I am. It's 2016 was when we lost Alex. And I'm in, that disbelief space of how in the heck has it been 10 years? So I understand and don't have one single doubt in my head that I will feel the same in 10 more years, because I don't know how 10 years, and, like everybody tells us, it went by in the blink of an eye and has been a snail's pace at the same time. Like it's felt like forever and like it's yesterday.
Well, I think for me, it's like time stands still. This event happened. And like you, because we work with other loss survivors and we've shared the story for, over and over again, time just stands still. Some days it feels like it was 5 years ago. And then some days it feels real at 20. I measure it by what other events have happened since Chelsie died. And then I put a time on it and I go, oh, okay, so that happened 15 years ago and Chelsie was already gone. This past week, I have a cassette tape that was given to me within a couple weeks when Chelsie died. She used to like to do karaoke at a friend's house. And so the friend had her singing karaoke on a cassette tape. We met and she gave it to me. I had Chelsea's voice on there. Then I put it in a box because I didn't want the tape to get damaged. If it broke, then it's gone. So I kept saying, okay, I'm going to take it to a professional company and have it transferred onto a CD disc or something. I'll do that next month. I'll do that next year. I'll do that soon or whatever. And now the tape is still in the box. And now I have to say, oh, it's been 20 years. I got this. And so I keep getting these reminders of here's all this stuff that has happened after she died. And it's weird. It's just very weird to put that number on it. And you can feel the loss, but just say, oh, it's been 20 years or 10 years. It's just very strange to me.
It makes us realize the strangeness of time in general. Right?
Because when she died, we had MySpace. So we didn't even have really Facebook. We didn't have smartphones. So she had a little
flip phone.
Yeah.
That was before that. Motorola flip phone type of time. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I couldn't get anything off of it. But yeah, I look at that and I go, look at all that's happened, in our world that she never saw. So that kind of stuff makes me sad when I think of, oh, she didn't get to see this or that.
Kids, like a lot of our kids that were creative and warm and connected, I've often thought about the incredible time they might have had trying to do the TikTok dances and some of the things that they would have also had the same frustrations probably. And we know there's a lot of pitfalls of social media, so I'm not saying it's all good, but I try to think about the positive things, right? All the fun that you see on some of those, and to think that they didn't get to experience some of that is, because even 10 years ago, there wasn't TikTok.
She would have been all over that. She would have been lining everybody up and filming them and
shuffled. I can do that. All the people that complained about lockdown. A lot of us didn't love it, but at the same time, wouldn't it have been nice to have our kid with us in lockdown,
Sure.
right? And the things we could have done as a family instead of being a broken family. So yeah, all the things. So so many unanswered questions. And like you said, time stands still and speeds by all at once. So, we've talked, I'm going against what we kind of have talked about off camera, off microphone a little bit, but because we try not to drag ourselves back to the early days as often as we do. But when you think about those earlier years, you have to go all the way back to the beginning, but what suicide looked like and felt like for you as a mother, and when did it start to shift for you into the space of, and was it, for me, it was almost out of a necessity. Like I knew I couldn't find the resources. So I finally thought, I can do this. I can help myself and help others find resources. That was kind of my story. What was your story in getting into being a mother grieving to being a mother grieving, wanting to help others?
Mine came shortly after she died because I put myself into peer support. I was attending a peer support meeting that was specific to suicide loss. I was hearing sibling loss and spouse loss, child loss. But what was interesting when we started, there's ground rules for every group. One of the ground rules was what you say in that room stays in that room. We couldn't acknowledge that we knew somebody from the group if we saw them out in a public space. If we ran into them in the grocery store, we couldn't be like, oh, hey. And that just irritated me. And because I was listening to these stories that we've all dealt with, that nobody will talk to me and I don't have anybody I can talk to. And I thought, well, this whole don't acknowledge them is perpetuating the problem. The more I heard this, the more I got angry. I realized that there's so many people out in the world that have no idea what we're going through, either because we're not talking about it or because we're getting shut down when we try to talk about it. Here's this big gap in our population of grievers that are suffering in silence and they're not getting the support that they need. And so the more I heard this, I'm like, well, I'll go tell everybody about it. We have people who are struggling and we have people that aren't being heard. We have people that are being dismissed with their story of, oh, you shouldn't feel that way, or you're just imagining that, or dismissive, right? And it just perpetuated from there, coupled with the fact that I went back to college solely because I started looking, once you lose somebody, you have that bucket list of stuff you want to accomplish now. And so one of them for me was to go back and finish my degree because I had had years of night school, single mom, class here and there. I was going to go back to school and get my bachelor's in accounting. And my husband said, well, if you're going to spend that money to go back to school, is accounting what you really want to do? And I said, no. I said, I think I really want to go back to school and get a degree in psychology because I want to learn what our behavioral health people are learning in school. Because there was a whole big story with her, the therapist that Chelsie had. It was like, oh, I'm going to figure out what that therapist learned in school and how this broke down to get to where we are now. And those two things, the stories not being heard and the professional sector not really being helpful to other survivors, yeah, it just kind of grew from there. I was going to be loud and proud. I was going to have education behind me to back up whatever came back at me in protest for even talking about it in the first place.
And so what year would that be that you ended up with your psychology degree and decided to go?
So Chelsie died in 2006, the very end of 2006. And I graduated with my bachelor's in 2012. So early 2012. So it was a 6-year process for that. But I mean, I was out doing the AFSP walks and I was basically forging friendships with any other survivor who was going through the same thing, particularly moms, because I think we gravitate to people going through the same loss type. Those women that I met in that support group were still friends 20 years later. I think we build these friendships out of pain, and it's just a lifelong friendship, right? Connection at that point.
Well, there's some ladies for sure in my community that I think I will probably be friends with for the rest of my life. Even if some of them have connected with each other, even if they're no longer in my space, some of them are still connected. I have these things that I feel like I kind of get up on my little soapbox and say over and over again. I can probably count them in a couple hands. There are a handful of things. And one of the things I told moms for years is these are the best friends that you do not know that you need. These are people that you'll meet that will change your life. They will change the people that you can, because think of how isolated we feel.
Right.
Think of how we don't actually connect with some of the people we may have connected really well with before. Our after is so very changed permanently that some of those people just don't fit in our life anymore. Many of them don't. And even the ones that may stick around, there's still a disconnect at that level. And this is one of the deepest places of a mother, is our mother's heart. And so, like you said, when you're connected at that very deepest pain that a mother can have, you bypass all that other stuff and you're just connected. And so, yeah, I mean, I think it's taken time. Some of these moms probably initially thought, oh, this is great. And now they realize they have a community for life. A lot of them now vacation together because they've given up vacationing with, in our world, we have kind of called it, we kind of use the Harry Potter term muggle. And so we call the non-grieving community muggles. But it's like you realize that it's not the same going on vacation with your muggle friends as it would be to go on. Because even if you aren't spending, and I'm sure that the people that aren't grievers think that we're all just going and crying together. And that's not necessarily the case. Right. Anything like mine, you can go and have a very good time and enjoy laughter and all those things with those grievers. But the safety that you have together, knowing that if somebody does cry, or taking time to light the candles on the mantle because everybody brought their pictures so that they could talk about none of that's received in that weird way where they're like, okay, now we're going to light the candle for her child. The weird, other people think we're odd, where we all know it's just normal. That's part of our life. And we give each other space. If you need space, if you're having a bad day, you say, I'm just kind of off today. I saw a memory, and people will be like, okay, you do you and tell us what you need. They don't do that. Oh my gosh, what's wrong?
What can I do? What can I do?
It's just so different. And so to have that safety in a community, you also recognized how important that was.
Well, yeah, safety is key, right? It's the number one priority in this situation. I mean, I don't care if you've lost a child or a spouse, what I found, you can agree or disagree with me, but I became a whole new person. It was like relearning myself all over again. I had things that I used to like to do that I just don't like to do anymore. I have things that I never did before that I do now. And the people that knew me before I lost Chelsie, a lot of them going, what is wrong with you? And I don't know, but this is the new me. You either like it or you don't. Even my husband, for years, he was like, well, remember, you like listening to this singer on the radio. Okay, but that was pre-Chelsie. Now we're post-Chelsie, and I could care less if I hear that music on the radio. And he just looks at me like, I don't understand what you're talking about. I'm like, yeah, I know. But we're like brand new people trying to learn ourselves, trying to grieve this person that we lost, trying to find a space where we feel safe. And it's just a very weird space to live in.
It is. It really is.
And so to have those other people going through the exact same thing, makes us feel, I think, a little more normal.
Mm-hmm.
And
we live in our Western culture is so very bad at grief that most of us, unless you encounter some, which most of us in our spaces probably don't, because if they were raised in a different culture and they know how to handle grief in a better way, they may not gravitate towards some of the same spaces we do, because they know how to honor grief and hold grief, and their family talks about it and honors their loved ones and weaves them into the fabric of their life like a lot of cultures do with ancestors and deceased people. And they don't, put them over and go, okay, the casseroles are done. We need you to be done with this. like the Western world does. It's a very difficult space to live in when we live in such a fast-paced society that expects it to be done by the time we're back at work in 2 weeks.
We also live in a society that, because it's suicide, it's full of stigma and it's full of shame and guilt. It's bad enough to be told, okay, you had a week off and now you're back to work and you need to perform at the level that you did before and all your stuff needs to be in on time. It's so hard because I had that, right? I had a week off and the whole week was a blur because I had family coming into town and I had to deal with the funeral home and I had to deal with the life insurance company. And so and then everybody left town. And then the next day I'm back at work like nothing happened. And then of course you get a coma.
Basically.
And you have the people that don't want to talk to you because they don't want to set you off, which I get that. But, I wish they knew that I could drop a paperclip on the floor and it's going to set me off. There really isn't anything they could say or not say to me that isn't going to send me off into tears. It's a weird space to be in when you're trying to navigate out in the real world and live up to this perception that everybody has about what processing grief should look like, and then throw in the element of suicide with that. I've heard so many heartbreaking stories over the years. I've heard people that wouldn't go to somebody's funeral because it was a suicide. I've heard horrible stories.
It's as if it's not complicated enough. There's so many more complications than anybody can even imagine. And I do agree wholly with you that we're just not the same person afterwards. Like you said, things we didn't like, things we like. All of that makes complete sense to me because I've lived in this world for 10 years. But I do feel like so many people outside of our immediate sphere are waiting for us to get back to ourselves, right? We do to ourselves subconsciously in the early years. We subconsciously think we're going to get back to our old self at some point. And then you hit that now what wall, where you feel like you've done all the survival, you've done the early stuff, you feel like you've attended peer groups, you've probably done some therapies, you might be meditating, and then you realize, oh, wait, that doesn't fix me, and I didn't just magically become my old self again, and you really hit that now what, oh my God, I've got to carry this forever wall. That's when you really enter into, I use acceptance in a different way than some people do with acceptance. I had no choice but to accept the loss. He's not going to walk back through the door. But to me, you get into a space of accepting. You have to accept that this is going to just be a part of you forever and that you are changed, that you are not getting back, that you are rebuilding. And in some ways, I'm now there, and I hope this offers hope. I don't know if you've been there too, because now we can offer 2 doses of hope, is I now know that this doesn't mean I wouldn't trade it all to have Alex back, because I would.
Absolutely.
But I now get to say, okay, I'm not ever going to get back there. So now I do have some exciting choices I could make about what does that look like? What could I do with the rest of my life? Things I didn't dream of before. I now get to think about, oh, could that be possible? Because things that might have held me back before don't anymore. Meaning, once we know this can happen, we tend to go, well, what the fuck's the worst thing that could happen if I did that? And so you're more willing to maybe take risks and do things that you weren't before. And so I have chosen to accept some of the gifts that have come after Alex's loss, even though I wish I didn't have them.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I agree with everything you just said.
It takes a while.
It does. I've been thinking a lot lately when we first start with this loss and we hear all of the little sayings like time heals all wounds. Some of the other ones that just really took us off.
They're in a better place now. They wouldn't want you to be sad. We could just keep going, right? Yeah.
And so with those, I've started to kind of dig into them recently. And the whole, they're in a better place and whatever. It's like if you look at the person who is saying that thing and you expound on what it means and you take it for what it means, I won't say it's not as bad. But I don't know.
I think I know where you're going with this. And I agree with you. There's some of that as hard as it is to hear and it's not helpful for early grievers to hear, doesn't mean it's completely untrue either. Because Alex wouldn't want me to be sad and ruin the rest of my life, if you will. He very well and hopefully is in a place, whatever we want to believe that better place is. hopefully it is free of pain and he's all those things. And yet it's still not helpful to hear when you're an early grieving person.
Right.
It's not helpful to hear from someone who doesn't understand. Let's take it a step further.
Sure. So like with the time heals all wounds thing, I think you and I can agree you're 10 years out. I'm almost 20. We're in a better place because we've had all this time to constantly talk about our child, to research maybe about why this could have happened or what was going on. Heal our trauma. I'm a big proponent of talk about your child all the time because there's healing in that rather than holding it in and not sharing it with anybody, because all it does is affect your brain, your biological composition in a negative way. So time does heal those wounds because of what you did in that time, because of the choices you made. And I totally agree with you that saying that to somebody that just lost somebody last week, to say, oh, time heals all wounds, just give it time, is really an insult to that person. But recognize that there's going to be time involved in this grief process. And what you do with that grief or what you do with that time is important with how that evolves and how that turns out for you later on. So, I knew when Chelsie died that I needed to be, I didn't know what it looked like yet, but I knew I needed to be around the people that had already navigated this to figure out how they did it. Because I wasn't going to figure it out on my own. It was going to take me mirroring somebody else's choices. Initially, I didn't find that support group for suicide loss for like 7 months. But I did start with a Compassionate Friends group, which the Compassionate Friends organization is if you lost a child by any method. And so, I was the only one in there that had lost a child by suicide, but they were very receptive. There's still that commonality of you lost a child and it sucks. We just get the added element of the suicide itself. These platitudes of time heals all wounds and whatever, if you start digging into those, it can help a little bit to see where those came from and why people say them, to certainly find to come back at somebody.
Most people say them, in my opinion, to make themselves feel safer. It isn't about helping the griever feel safe. They just want their own world to be a little safer. And if they think this person's going to get better, it's going to get okay, that feels safer to them than just thinking, oh my God, you're going to carry.
I think it's even more than that. I think we have a culture where we have watched and learned from the media, other people, that's how that person responded to someone grieving. So that's the proper way for me to do it. So if we've watched 50 years of TV where somebody died and they went, oh, he's in a better place, be okay.
It's a condition.
Then you think
a conditioned response.
Exactly. And so, okay, that's what you tell yourself, that's what I'm supposed to say. And so I've spent all this time trying to educate different audiences of, be careful when you say these things because they aren't coming off like you think they are. Instead, you could say this instead. And it's usually very receptive by that people. It's usually, the response is usually, oh my gosh, I had no idea that I was creating this anger, trauma, whatever. Thank you for telling me. Same thing, I get a lot of people of suicide loss that they won't say like how many kids I have. Or I won't acknowledge that my loved one existed because I don't want the additional questions of, oh, how old are they and where are they and what do they do? Because then you would have to say, oh, they died. And then somebody would say, well, how? So it's this big conversation we don't want to have. Especially when I'm talking to people, it tends to come up around the holidays. I guessed it on somebody's podcast. And I just said, you know what? You're allowed to not tell people your story. Just because they ask you the story, you're not required to give them that story. You control the narrative of what you say. It is okay to say to somebody, I don't want to talk about that. I've people come back and go, oh my gosh, you're right. I didn't realize we're conditioned, right? We're conditioned.
Someone asked, we have to respond. Yeah,
right.
Have this friendly, well, they asked me, I couldn't be rude. You don't owe anyone your story.
You can not give your story and not be rude all at the same time. I'm like, be professional, be nice when you respond, and just say, you know what, I don't like to talk about this. Or for a while there, I'd say, yeah, I have 2 kids. My son lives in Washington. My daughter passed away when she was 16, and we miss her every day. And if I got the follow-up question of, oh my gosh, what happened? Then I would say, you know what, I don't like to talk about it. It's really hard for me to talk about it. Thank you for asking. I appreciate that. But I just can't. And anybody with any common decency will say, you know what, no, I get it.
If they don't have common decency, they deserve whatever is coming back. So
Exactly.
there's always going to be someone who crosses a line, right? So, but it's funny because you said, one of the platitudes that a lot of people do is the time heals all wounds. And I tell grievers that are actively looking to try to heal their trauma and live with their grief that it isn't about time does nothing but pass. It's about what we choose to do with the time that matters. What work are we doing? Who are we mirroring? Who are we looking to? Where are we going? Time's going to pass anyway. It isn't magically going to heal anything. Right. You have to choose to dig into that. When I think about the fact that you've had quite a journey in over 2 decades, I wonder if you would speak to a little bit about what changes, what remains, and is there any surprises now that you're getting close to that 20-year mark?
You mean what's changed within myself over the 20 years?
Yeah.
Well, when the whole journey started, I was a single mom, and I was in that mind space of there's so much to do on any given day, and we can't get it all done. I got to be 50 million places at one time, whether it's soccer, whether it's basketball. And at the moment that she died, I won't say I took life for granted before that, but it was a good wake-up call to where I make sure that I tell people I love them when I leave. They realize more that life is short. You have no control over what's going to happen day to day. You just don't. Probably a little bit. I've had to slow down. So I've slowed down a lot. I'm sorry. What was the other part of your question?
It's remained. And has there been any big surprises now that you're at the 20 mark? I mean, I'm 10 years in and I can look back over 10 years and think, this is something that's surprising now that I'm at 10. So is there anything that's surprising to you now when you look at where you're at now versus where you maybe thought you were going to be at 20 years? That backup question would be, if we talk about what changes, what's remained? Has anything remained of Tracy before?
I don't think so. I would like to think that I haven't changed that much. I've always been a decent human being and empathetic to people and very supportive, be a helper, even before this change in work other than
your heart. I do feel like I've bridged back to little pieces of who I was. Now, they look different in this new version of me. Like, for example, I'm a retired chef and I didn't cook for years after Alex died. My husband fed me, or I might not have eaten, right? Because I didn't care. And I didn't think I would ever care about what once lit my fire. I just didn't think I was going to care about it again. It took a while. I was probably 4 years in, 3 for sure. 3 or 4 years in before I started realizing maybe I do still like this. Now I'm at the point where I feel like food is that love of cooking and food and the part of healing that is not only feeding ourselves, but sitting at a table and all of the things I held sacred before, there's a piece of that I feel like I've crossed a bridge and brought back. It doesn't look at all the same in the new version of Melissa. I didn't go back to that old version, but I pulled some threads of that and reinterpreting them in this rebuilt version of myself.
As you're talking and I'm thinking about the question, I can see where because I think I've done that. I don't cook, so I can't speak to that. But at 20 years, there's been so many changes that even if I revisited some of those things that I used to like, and maybe still like them now, there's such a big gap of time that I can't differentiate the two anymore, if that makes sense. So it's really hard now to go back and go, oh, I used to like this. And then 10 years later, I took this piece of it. Now, 20 years later, this is just who I am.
Right.
To compare the two is harder Not that I'm avoiding the question.
You bring up a valid point, because was that this loss that is at the deepest place something can happen in one of the most complicated ways a child can die, colors our whole world in a way that it almost becomes impossible to sift through 20 years, 10 years in, 20 years in. It would stand to reason that even if our child hadn't died, our life would look a little different. We all are getting older. You do different things. You're nearing retirement.
Had new life experiences.
Right. You've been through menopause. Life changes. Your children leave home. And so some of that, but it becomes almost impossible to separate out because it has now colored your whole world. So it's hard to even say, how much would I have changed? What would I have done? Because you now are looking at the book that is completely colored by your grief, and everything that you do is held up against that. And I always say, you can find joy again. You find your way back to happiness and hopes and dreams. And then I say, and that joy will always live right alongside the worst thing that ever happened to you. It will never be the innocent, carefree joy that you had before. In some ways, my joy is deeper and more profound now because I experience it in a way that I couldn't appreciate before. But it still lives alongside the grief.
Right. That's why that memory is always still there.
Who's missing and who should be here?
We tend to measure what we're doing. We measure it against that memory. Was this before or after that death? Would I be doing this now if she was still here? We lived in Washington State when she died. She grew up there. I grew up there. 6 months after she died, we moved to Nevada because I couldn't deal with driving by the cemetery every day to go to work. And then we moved back to Washington. And now for the past 3 years, we've been in Missouri. Had she not died, the odds of me being in those places and none. So there's experiences that I've had after her that wouldn't have happened had she been here. But there would have been a different trajectory, different timeline, right? Where she was still here, we probably would have done X, Y, Z. It's really easy to get caught up in, what
it is. Instead of accepting, you don't have to like it, but accepting that this is the path and you're going to make choices along the path. And I think, if we could change it, we all would. But knowing that we can't, making choices to figure out how to go down a path towards happiness, towards different things and dreams is, there is some wisdom in, it's not a good I think for me, I don't want Alex's legacy to be that he destroyed his mother, because he would have never, ever in a million years done that on purpose, ever. I can't have that be his legacy. I owe him more than that. In the beginning, that was all I needed, was I'm doing this for Alex. Eventually, I faked it till I made it. I eventually started caring enough to do it for myself. It took a while. But I always say, start doing it for them because they're worth it. And then you'll figure out somewhere along the line how to do it for yourself also. Yeah. Talk about what actually led you to create Journey Thru Grief, and when did the whole world that you live in now in Journey Thru Grief start? So when we talk about, some of that, you are where you are in Journey Thru Grief and the things that you do now, but when did that actually start? Like, when did you decide, I'm going to start coaching and I know it didn't just happen overnight. So when did you do that part? Because you sounded like you started going to peer groups and decided to go to school. 2012, you graduate with your bachelor's. Here we are now, 14 years later. Time is weird.
It's definitely been an evolution. I didn't start out thinking, I'm going to go out and I'm just going to change the world. Went through peer support, heard everybody's struggles, thought it was ridiculous that we weren't talking about this out in the real world. Went back to school to try to figure out what they were doing in the psychology world, to which I learned that they're not talking about it in college to our behavioral health students. So then I got more angry. And then I realized that I get a lot more done when I'm angry, which is kind of sad. And maybe I need some therapy for that. When I graduated in 2012, it started out simply I'm going to start a website to put resources out there so that all of these loss survivors that can't find resources can find them. That's basically as simple as it was. And so I spent weeks going, well, what do we call it? What should the name be? And so came up with Journey Thru Grief at that time, bought the domain name. I have to laugh real quick. I was fighting with my hosting platform the other day, and they told me that I didn't have protection on Journey Thru Grief's domain. And I said, no, that can't be right, because I've had this a long time, and you obviously dropped it somewhere along the way, and now you want me to pay for it to get it back. I had to actually type out, I've had this domain name for X amount of years, and this shouldn't be like this, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, oh, that's 14 years I've owned this domain name. So 14 years ago, I started this Journey Thru Grief. And I tried to be cute and spell through as THRU, because there was other Journey Thru Grief spelled the right way. And so I just kind of limped along going, okay, I'm going to create resources, or I'm going to have these resources. And then I couldn't find any. So then I was like, okay, I'm going to create resources. And so I created like some flyers. But it wasn't until COVID hit and I was stuck in my house and started thinking about, what do loss survivors need that they aren't getting? And where's the disconnect in this? And so, because I got to go out on the internet and I got to talk to people nationwide and worldwide, I realized that there was a bazillion amount of resources out there that are really good
that people just don't know how to find.
And so that's when I said, okay, I don't need to create a whole bunch of resources. Then that kind of evolved into, but what do we need? So then I said, well, what are the problems that we have? How can we fix them? So we know we had the problem of people that would go to therapy and they either didn't like their therapist because their therapist didn't understand. And so that tied back to my college education. And then we had the ones where I like my therapist, they're fantastic, but I can only get in to see them twice a month. So I'm like, okay, what can we do to alleviate the big gap in time? Because as you know, you're living this day to day, all day long, 2 a.m, all of it. To say, okay, I'll put you down for an hour or 2 weeks from now isn't realistic on what we need. So I said, well, why don't we look at coaching? Can coaching even fit in this space? And so about that time, I went back to school and I got my master's in psychology, and it had a concentration in life coaching. That's when I learned that life coaching actually derives from positive psychology. So all those people out there that are saying, oh, you only use coaching if you want to lose weight, or you use coaching maybe in business. No, I mean, it's actually relevant. It's actually a professional sector of psychology. So I started doing life coaching. And then, like you said at the very beginning, we just met. So it's like, even the coaches aren't finding each other to share stories or ideas or what have you. Looking at what do we not have? What's wrong in our therapy world? They really aren't looking at the realistic grief cycle of what we're going through as loss survivors. I sit in peer support groups, and our loss survivors are complaining about the stages of grief and how the stages of grief really don't apply, and how mad they are at their therapist because that's all their therapist wants to talk about. Don't get me wrong. There's a lot of really great therapists out there. So I'm not slamming all therapists, but there's work that needs to be done as well. So I said, well, what does this really look like? And ended up creating the 4 phases of suicide loss. I've been talking about that for probably 4 or 5 years now. And I've taken it up to professional psychology conferences, and I've put it in front of the people who work in this field or create the programs or create the models that therapists have to follow when they have someone in their office. It's been very receptive, but like with everything, the process of how to get these concepts where they need to be. But I said, when we look at the phases of suicide loss specifically, there's really 4. The first one is devastation. I lived in a fog for 4 years, probably. I'd put my keys in the freezer, and I still don't know why I did that. But the brain fog and the trying to get out of bed and trying to get to work and trying to get housework done after I worked all day, and that was impossible because we're absolutely devastated down to our core, down to our cellular level of functioning. These don't have time frames. I can't say, okay, you're in devastation for 2 years and then no, everybody's different, right? Mm-hmm. Your devastation phase could last 5 years, 10 years until you get to that next phase, the question and grow phase. We question, why did they do this? What did I do? What did I not do? What should I have done? Who made my loved one angry? And maybe that was it. When I was in that phase, there's a gentleman by the name of Kevin Hines. I don't know if you've heard of Kevin. Kevin tried to jump off the Golden Gate Bridge. He did jump, trying to end his life. And he didn't die. He has spent decades now going out and talking to people about why he did what he did and why he's glad it didn't end his life. He was coming to the town I lived in, and he was going to be doing a presentation. And so in my grieving brain, I said, well, I'm going to go sit and listen to him speak because maybe that will give me some insight as to why Chelsie made this choice, right? If you have somebody else that did this, what was going on? And, all that to say, Kevin's awesome. I've met Kevin a couple times, but his story is different than Chelsie. So it really didn't give me any insight at all. But I think we get to that point that we are questioning, and that's growing our healing process because we're bringing in information that's either good or bad or whatever, but it's helping us grow, right? To get to the post-traumatic growth kind of phase. And then eventually we find ourselves holding steady, right? We're getting to work. We're getting to where we need to be. We're being responsible adults, or we're trying anyway to get those things done that we need to. And then that leads into, I was calling it the acceptance phase. And then I got pushback because I called it that. And somebody suggested, well, maybe we should change that to be the moving forward phase. I'm like, okay, yeah, I could see that. Because that's what we're doing. Like you said earlier, right? We're accepting the fact it happened. We're not accepting it and being good with it. So in accepting it, that it happened, we can then move forward. I was doing a presentation a couple of years ago on this concept. And in front of a room full of people, I had a little plastic tray and a whole bunch of Legos in the tray. And I said, this is your life before your person died. You've got all these things you like to do and things that we don't do now because we liked them then. All the things, our job, our kids, our pets, all of it represented by these Legos. And then the person dies by suicide, and I take the tray and I dump it upside down and the Legos go everywhere. And that's what happens, right? We lose all of these things that we used to like. Some of them we can easily pick right back up, but some of them go under the couch and under the cabinet and we can't reach, and they're gone, right? And so we spend the rest of our lives trying to recollect our Legos to get them back in the box. And we may go buy new Legos because we can't find the old Legos or these are prettier. When you look at that analogy, I'm just trying to get all my Legos back in the box. I've gotten a lot of positive reception to that analogy of, oh my God, yeah. And of course, we know grief is not fun. So how does it feel when you step on a Lego, right? My son used to drop Legos all the time. If you're barefoot,
I have a tub in the basement and a grandson who, and some of those are so little.
Right. And you step on them and you're barefoot, it hurts. And that's grief, right? All of a sudden we have to deal with that one Lego that was on the floor and we step on it and it rocks our whole world.
Sends a shockwave through our body.
We're crying for a week, right?
Yeah.
And yes, I mean, I was really glad to come up with that. But so that's the 4 phases of suicide loss. Like I said, it's helped some people better understand what we're going through in the suicide process. I'm always trying to come up with things that people aren't doing, our experts aren't doing. The latest thing, I'm going to start a membership so we can get a bigger community of our lost survivors that feel safe. They can come into a safe environment. We don't have enough conferences really about suicide loss and getting our lost survivors together into a safe place where they can meet other loss survivors and be loved on and appreciated. Because I mean, there's so much healing in that camaraderie of knowing that you're not alone and peer support. So think of it like peer support on steroids is what I'm telling people. Where I'm on the fence, I may do a virtual option instead of in person. I don't know yet what that looks like. But for now, I think people would heal more effectively if they could sit next to someone else and share a box of Kleenex or pet a golden retriever together, because we'll have those. Yeah.
And yeah, I think we've seen things evolve since COVID, right? Because COVID changed so much about how we all interact that I do think we're starting to see there's so much positive that came from being global online. As far as I say, I have a support community that couldn't have come together because nobody lives in the same community. Right? On one hand, what a blessing. But on another hand, those women have now attended retreats together. So they now understand that they do need that connection as well. There's a group of women that have been in my community for some time doing some really deep healing work together. They've been working together in my community for years. And now they just want to make sure they get together once a year, right? That tells you the power of we are trying to migrate back to connection in person. It doesn't negate the connection online, because I'll stand behind my grief community couldn't have been built the way it exists if we didn't do it online, because you really can find a place that you belong, because you're not everyone's flavor. I'm not everyone's flavor. Like people attract like people. Your community ends up being similar. Some people, their message comes from a different place. Whatever resonates with you, you find your people. If you live in a community of a couple thousand people and there's not a grief support within 100 miles of you, you wouldn't have even had an option, and that you do have with Zoom. There's so much power in being together. So I agree with you. Before we move on, I want you to talk about your conference. I just want to say how much I love your 4 phases. There's so much of what you said that I see the overlap in. This only tells me that mothers understand mothers, and that even though our journeys can be very different, because none of our children died exactly the same way, none of them came from exactly the same circumstances, there is enough of a connection mother to mother to hear you as another mother and me as a mother who have chosen to work with other grievers, and to hear so much similarity. We may label them slightly differently, but I always talk about we don't move on, we move forward. I always say you're not alone. It's the name of my support group. You are not alone. I call the phases, and I think I've said, I didn't coin it. I haven't done anything official with it, but I did want to say stages, because we want to try to separate ourselves from the predetermined, you got to do, and you're done. Poor Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, who had that whole thing bastardized back in the day, because that wasn't what she intended. We used to think, have you been through your phases? Or your stages? Have you healed yourself? Back when my dad died 28 years ago, I was handed a booklet with the stages in it. This is what's going to happen when he dies, and we think you move through it and you're done, right? I've been for years calling my phases survival, hope, and healing, and then I got further, because then I was 4+ years in, starting the podcast, not knowing what else I was going to do, not thinking there was anything else. I didn't have a grand plan. I just started a podcast and started talking into a much less nice microphone than I have now, just hoping that it would help somebody. When I got further in, I realized that for me, the other 2 pieces that were missing were evolution and integration. You evolve, and then eventually you integrate everything into the new rebuilt version of you. That doesn't mean you're done, because then you continue to evolve and integrate as you go on. But you don't really ever go back to survival. Hope shows up in your life later, but not the same way it does in years 2. I always say 2-ish years, because nobody's exactly the same. Survival is survival. The first year, everybody's surviving. You got to get through all those anniversaries and stuff. So that year I kind of stuck to, we all go through year 1 and survive. But like you said, we are devastated for a very long time.
Survival looks different for everybody, right?
Yeah, because
we're surviving that first year. But survival, it can feel like survival 4 years out, when that one thing that hasn't happened since the death happens out of the blue and you didn't see it coming. And then it can feel like you're right back
to square one.
Square one.
It's not linear, so you could bob back in.
So that's why I said it's really a phase, and we bebop back into all of them at some point or another, where it's not like a one and done kind of thing.
But you don't live in survival anymore. You just visit it.
Right. And we've hopefully learned tools by that time of, oh, I feel like this. I got to do this to get past that.
Right. Exactly.
Rather than sitting there for 6 months.
Not having a clue what to do.
Not having a clue.
Exactly. Yeah. So let's wrap this up. And I want to give you as much time as you want to share about the Journey Through Grief conference and the dates, because it's so exciting, like you said, and that's weird to say, but you understand why I say it. It's exciting to know that there are very few conferences for loss survivors to attend that's just suicide-centric to the loss. So, and that brings survivors, clinicians, all sorts of people together in a space to talk about the hushed topic of suicide grief. Let's talk about Journey Through Grief conference.
The whole topic of suicidology is so vast, and there's so many different elements to it. So what ultimately happened in 2023 was I had to take Journey Through Grief and essentially split it in half. And Journey Through Grief has remained the direct to survivor support and resource element. Then I also created a new company called Postvention Collective. Postvention Collective, I go out and I approach the doctors and psychologists to try to explain to them, this is what suicide loss really looks like. I know this is what you think happens, but this is what really happens. This week, I'm at a conference doing that same thing. 2 years ago, I said, all of our behavioral health workers, experts, they like to go to conferences. And so I said, you know what, I'm done not talking about postvention, which is our bereavement care. So I'm going to create a conference. And so Postvention Collective has a conference for 2 days to reach the professional sector. Journey Through Grief is then having their 2-day conference that is just for loss survivors. So I wanted to explain that because you had mentioned the behavioral health workers. So they can certainly come to the loss survivor conference, but it's not being marketed as that. So Journey Through Grief, I said, we need that space where our loss survivors can come together. We can love on them. We'll feed you. We'll find all the resources out there. We have vendors coming that will share the different healing programs that they have, coaching programs, what have you. We'll have a bookstore. We'll have a health and wellness room. I'm excited about the comfort dogs that are going to come, and people can there's a lot of healing to just sit on the floor and pet a puppy. I want it to be a safe space. Chelsea's birthday would have been the week before. We're going to have birthday cake. It may be cupcakes. I don't know yet. We're going to have birthday celebration for my daughter because I can. We'll celebrate everybody's birthdays collectively because I'm tired of our loss survivors just being put in the corner and assuming that they're getting the help they need. They'll be fine. Well, we're not fine, right? Unless they have people like you or they have people like me or they have a few other really great resources out there. They're in isolation and they're thinking that they deserve to be in isolation, which is really sad because that's not true. Nobody deserves to be isolated and ostracized for something that happened that they had no control over at all. There's no way you could have been in your loved one's head to know that this is what they intended to do. And so we carry that and we need a release for that. We're going to have speakers talking about resilience and storytelling and why telling the story about your loved one and how you have managed your own grief, why it's important to share those stories with others, because the more we talk about it, the more it becomes mainstream and normalized. And that's part of the way to start change in our culture. Really good food, because I'm picky about my food. So I picked out some really great food. We're having it in a space that's beautiful. If you go on Journey Through Grief's website, I posted pictures. We have palm trees inside the building around the pool. I kind of have an affection.
In the middle of the United States.
In the middle of the United States where we have wind, right? No water to speak of, really. We have some good lakes, but nothing where you would expect to see a palm tree. So I'm like, yeah, this is perfect. Their mascot is this little pink flamingo called Howie. And so they have the little stuffy, right? Like, okay, they're probably going to sell a lot of those that week because everybody needs one of those. So it's a really fun, healing atmosphere and space to be in. I mean, I hope people come. And August 14th and 15th here in Springfield, Missouri. And we're probably 20 minutes north of Branson. So if you like Branson, Missouri, where they have shows, it's kind of like a little mini Las Vegas there. Come for the entertainment, stay a couple extra days, do some sightseeing. We have like supposedly the #1 aquarium in the United States. I haven't been to it, but I've heard really great things. And so, I mean, it's just we're at 66. It's the 100th anniversary of Route 66. So there's been a lot of different events going on in town surrounding that. It's a really cool little community to come in. We have our own airport and they have a free shuttle to the hotel. The hotel is giving a $139 room rate right now. This podcast that we're doing right now didn't get out in time before we had to change from the early bird rate to the regular rate. For your listeners, until the 15th of June, I'm going to give $50 off so that your listeners can go back down to the $399 rate, because I think that's affordable. In this economy, it's hard to say what's affordable for anybody, but it's not the $800, $920 event, right? It's $399 and it includes breakfast and lunch for 2 days. So when you're looking at putting money towards healing yourself and getting yourself on a better footing, it's important to look at these kind of offerings because not a lot of people do them. I hear a lot of pushback about why should you spend money for these kind of things? Why isn't it all free? I wish that there were tons of grants and funding out there to make it all free. But the realistic part of it is we tend to bootstrap a lot of this stuff ourselves. Therapy is not free. Typically, you got to pay for that. You got to pay for medications. You have to pay for pretty much all of life. Think of it as an investment in yourself and your healing. If you can't afford it, that's fine too. I'm trying to find some scholarships. So keep following Journey Thru Grief's page, because if I get the money to cover some attendees, I'm going to put it on there. Think about some personal healing and investing in yourself, because this is a hard animal to get over. It's a very complex grief cycle that isn't as simple as just waiting it out and hoping it ends, because it doesn't work that way.
You're right, it does. I'm so thankful, and knowing it's been several years in the making. You have to be getting to that point of it's almost there, it's almost real. For everybody listening, we'll see, but I'm planning on being there in several capacities. So hopefully there'll be a lot of us there that haven't had an opportunity to meet in person that will get to do that. I heard multiple things that are just so impressive to think that you're putting all of this in one space, and how wonderful. And I'm so thankful that you're willing to offer that couple of weeks here where my listeners can take advantage of the early bird price. Look in the show notes for how to do that. You'll also see all of the places to connect with Tracy, all the places to find everything she's talked about, anything we've talked about. I'll link in the show notes. I'll link you to her social media, all the things so you can be sure to follow along and watch as it gets closer. Springfield isn't too awful far from Kansas City, so it's not hard to pull me back to the Midwest for any reason. Branson is the heart of the Ozarks, so don't hold that against the Ozarks if you've seen the TV series, which is wonderful, but also a bit terrifying. The Ozarks are a beautiful, wonderful place to visit.
Something else to think about is for loss survivors to just venture out and do something new and different by themselves is scary. So, if you have like 2 or 3 of you that want to come as a group, let me know. We have like half table rates and full table rates, and make a girls' weekend or something out of it. Grieving moms weekend out of it, however you want to look at it. But plan your group and all come together. It's healing, right? It's all about healing.
I'm really excited that this option is going to be there for people. I know that your plan is to hopefully perpetuate it forward. I don't know if you're planning yearly or every other year, or do you even know yet?
I don't know that. We're going to see how this one goes.
We'll see how it goes. But if it goes well, then I think her intention is to try to do it more than once.
Absolutely.
Because again, we need these spaces. And if you can't figure out how to find it, reach out to me, reach out directly to Tracy. I'll make sure and we will make sure how to get you connected and get you signed up. I know that the traveling part comes to mind, Springfield, Missouri. So if you think you're interested and you're looking at flights, Springfield, Missouri, you can look at it on a map if you want to see how far the drive would be from other major airports.
St. Louis is 3.5. Kansas City is
2.5.
You can fly into Tulsa. That's about 3 hours.
If you knew people anywhere in the Midwest and wanted to, like she said, even other survivors, I have been involved in multiple groups that have gone to weekend conferences or different things like that. I hosted 3 retreats, as people might know. And I would say the biggest fear most moms have is traveling alone and just traveling, period, to an unknown situation. And I will tell you from my experience, I don't know anybody who hasn't been more than glad they made the journey to do the work for themselves, to connect with other moms, to be there in that space, sharing in community with other people that understand. It's hard, but we've already done and are already living every day, surviving the hardest thing we've ever been through. So getting on a plane, we can do that. It might be hard. I always say hard things are hard, but it doesn't mean they're not worth it. I think that I would encourage anybody that find a buddy to go with, and if you can't, feel the fear and do it anyway, because I think it's worth it.
Or get there and we'll find you a buddy once you get there.
I don't think you'll have any problem, but yeah, find me. I'll be your buddy for the weekend. It's so needed. And if you are feeling alone, you're not alone. You're not alone. Tracy and I are both here, and so are many other grievers that want to know you and walk this journey with you and help point you in the spaces and places that I always say it's not. I mean, some people might be, wait, you're both coaches. There's enough room for all of us out there where grievers need to find the places that they belong. And I can't help everybody and you can't help everybody. So let's all come together and make sure that people don't feel alone and that they figure out how to survive this in the best way possible for themselves. More importantly, share their child's story, talk about their kids, say their name, all the things that we know are so important to us and that we don't get to do enough of. That brings me to my final place, Tracy, which is I want you to end with a message of hope. But I'd love to know a favorite memory or story of Chelsie before you share that message of hope.
We had a memorial service for her the week that she died, and I didn't know who would come. We ended up with over 300 people there. One of her teachers, her high school math teacher, got up and told the story about how Chelsie would come to class and she would have her oversized purse with her, and she'd lay out her makeup all over the desk. And then all of the other girls in the class would gravitate around her desk, and she would start giving makeup tutorials in class. The teacher said he would have to stop her and say, hey, Chelsie, class is starting. And every time, because this happened a lot, she'd be like, oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize. I'm so sorry. She knew she wasn't supposed to be doing it, but it was just a little bit like, God. I'm like,
I'm sure a lot of the people that have been a part of those makeup circles really enjoyed that story from that teacher.
They were probably like, oh yeah, she taught us how to put our eyeliner on. So yeah, that's just kind of the wild spirited person that she was. And again, she was so cute and she was so vibrant. You couldn't get mad at her, even if she was doing something totally off the wall. Just a really good.
So much similarity between all of our kids. When you said that no one could get mad at her, that was Alex in a nutshell. You wanted to a lot of times. You just couldn't, because there's something about his charisma and his heart, and you knew it wasn't ill intent, even though there's times you wanted to go, you just couldn't.
She'd just bat her big eyelashes, her big blue eyes, and be like, all right, yeah, okay, fine.
Oh, thank you for sharing that about her. So a message of hope to the griever listening, Tracy.
I know we say it a lot. I mean, it's just kind of blown off now of you are not alone, but it's true. You are not alone. This kind of loss, it just sucks. It's just like one of the most earth-shattering things that you can go through. But there's healing in sharing the information with other people. There's healing in telling those stories. Know that as bone crushing as it feels right now, we learn to adapt. We don't get over it. We don't forget it, but we're biologically inclined to learn how to adapt to these situations. Send me an email. If you're struggling and you can't find anybody to talk to, I talk to everybody. You're not alone. You, Melissa, and me. You have other people, hopefully, in your circle. No, that one day at a time is all we can do. But
sometimes one breath at a time, but we do learn to carry it better. So thank you. Thank you so much. I appreciate the time, and I hope to see so many people at conference in August.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. We'll talk soon. Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.
So thank you for being here today. If something in this episode resonated with you, please feel free to share it with someone who might need it too. For resources, coaching, or ways to work with me, visit theleftoverpieces.com. And for now, take what serves you and leave the rest. Talk soon.